like PowerPoint at all, but I put together a PowerPoint today, and it has more than 3 slides, which is probably more than I've ever made in any PowerPoint. Today, I'm going to talk about the good of Pierce County homelessness, the bad of Pierce County homelessness, and the ugly. And I've chosen this fine Sierra Leone film as my narrative tool. And it's probably not an okay film to watch anymore because anything made in 1968 is probably horribly racist and sexist and lots of other things. But I'm going to roll with it anyway because I like the title. And who doesn't like the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I mean, really. The Man with No Name series launched Clint Eastwood into fame. I mean, I think we all know that Clint Eastwood's first film was in The Return of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, where he had a bit part as a scientist. But that film is certainly not worth watching because that is the only good thing in the entire film. I would rather recommend you hit Fistful of Dollars, or my favorite, A Few Dollars More. However, we are going to jump right in to homelessness. Before we start, this is, if you take away nothing else from this, and perhaps you will take away nothing else from this, my 2 major points are, we really, in Pierce County, this is my major recommendation for actually ending homelessness. Someone needs to take charge and get resourced for us to end homelessness in Pierce County. It's currently nobody's job. Nobody makes sure that the streets are not where people call home. It's nobody's responsibility. Lots of people are charged with spending money wisely, but nobody has their job of monitoring and figuring out how to end homelessness. And that's probably a big reason why we struggle to end homelessness, right? We don't have somebody that says they're going to figure it out. Nobody plotting it all out. We need this many shelter beds. We need this many other interventions, and we're going to get the money from the feds here and from private funders here and from general fund here. And like, nobody does that plotting in a way that I've seen in my 4 years. The second thing is, and this is because I'm a data guy, but bear with me, the data tells us what we need to know in order to meet the need. And with COVID-19, we obsess over the data of COVID-19, and we need to do the same thing with homelessness. So that's that. And before we get into what we're not doing well, we're going to talk about what we do well. And for the record, Clint Eastwood hates cigars. So even though he's got a cigar in his mouth, he's kind of a non-smoker. So let's just appreciate that about Clint Eastwood. He actually threatened to quit the film if they didn't make him stop smoking. But they didn't make him stop smoking. And yeah, and he still did the movie. The first thing that is amazing about Pierce, actually I'm going to take this tie off. I didn't have a black tie. I was kind of going for the coach look from Cheers. And so, yeah, I had to spray paint a tie black. Good thing I have a tie I hated. It's the evolution of homeless systems. And Pierce County has been incredibly attentive, as Pierce County government, in following the evolution. And by evolution, I mean the improvement of homeless systems. So 10 years ago, homeless systems looked very different than they do now. They spent a lot more money and they did not serve nearly as many people. And that's all changed. Housing first, working with people as they come to us, rapid rehousing, where instead of having this pathway of shelter to transitional housing to eventually their own apartment, we just drop them in an apartment right away, cover their rent for a while they get themselves put together. So that type of model has been something that as a community we followed. We followed the research and we've even led the way with a bunch of it. Diversion's a great example. And so as homeless systems evolve, Pierce County has done a good job of funding things that have been shown to be most cost effective and best for our clients, right? So they aren't just saving money at the cost of the client. It's more client voice, more choice of what goes on. And so my first recommendation with a big thumbs up and a gold background, because that's what recommendations need, is we need to continue to obsess on best practices. And by that, I mean following the research. Everybody that works in the homeless services industry, especially people involved in making decisions, need to be able to rattle off the cost of every intervention, the effectiveness of it, nationwide, locally. That should be just embedded in our heads, right? What's the success rate nationwide of rapid rehousing? 80%. What's an intervention cost in Pierce County on average? $7,200, right? What's transitional housing's effectiveness? 78% nationwide, so pretty close. What's the cost per intervention? Nationwide, it's about $18,000, right? So I get the same outcome at 3 times the cost. Right? So that's why we do rapid rehousing, and we all need to have that internalized. This is a a chart, bar graph. I'm not going to do too much of this. This is a bar graph from 2013 to now, according to HMIS, so I might not believe the first couple of years. These are the number of people housed by our homeless system every year. And the different colors are the different interventions. So blue is diversion. That's our least expensive tool. Yellow, orange is rapid rehousing, right? That's covering rent for 6 months, right? Diversion is the one-time assistance. Rapid rehousing, we cover rent for 6 months. And then transitional housing is red. And we've not done very much of that in our community. As you can see, it's pretty minor in our tool to end homelessness relative to rapid rehousing. But even rapid rehousing's been struggling lately, mostly because in 2017, we decided we would only serve the most vulnerable, and that those people are really hard to serve. And we've also seen tightening of our housing market and costs going up. And so those two things combined to make some of the housing that was a little easier, no one would have said it was easier in 2015, more challenging in 2019 and 2020. So my second recommendation is, when you look at this blue bar here, diversion, and how successful it is, we have got to fully fund diversion. And we do a pretty good job of that. And that's David Hasselhoff giving a thumbs up, because who doesn't love Knight Rider? Well, probably anybody that's not a fifth grader. But anyway, love David Hasselhoff, and I love diversion. And that is so cost effective, $1,200 per intervention. It's almost free. And we just really need to make sure that if somebody can use diversion, the money is there for them. Another thing that we do really well in this community is responding quickly to immediate concerns right in front of us. A good example of this is the stability site. Another good example is setting up the Tim shelter, both in responses to rather dangerous encampments. And so we use local funding, right? So we didn't wait for the grant process. We didn't wait for anything other than figuring out where the money was going to come from locally and making it happen. So that's City of Tacoma doing some really quick responses to things. And we've seen very fast responses in other places, right? COVID-19 has definitely shown organizations and our government able to do some quick pivots. So my third recommendation, with a thumbs up from a random monk off the internet, probably copyright protected photo, but that's how I roll, is we need to respond quickly to immediate needs. And again, that's something we do well as a community. Mapping where to find help. So one thing that we often hear about is the challenges of knowing where resources are. And I actually think this is me patting the Coalition to End Homelessness on its back, but making sure that we have a place where we can learn about resources and tell people about resources is incredibly valuable to us. And I kind of think it myself, like sort of, I create this map in my head, like this chart of where you need to go to get something. So when somebody says, and well, what would I do? I mean, they're starting a job, but where can they get childcare? I say, oh, well, turns out someone presented a few months ago at the Coalition. I remember who it was, and I'm going to go ahead and hook them up with some resources for childcare. And if I don't remember that part, I know Kelly Blucher's email address, and so I'll email her and ask her, what the heck do I do, right? So we create this map of knowledge of local resources and people that can help us with that. So my fourth recommendation is for us to make sure we make time to learn and share. And that's what this coalition's all about. Every week, you're crazy. But no, it's every week we're making sure we learn and share. Teamwork is another super huge asset in this community. We work together. We do not work against each other in any of the social services that I'm aware of. There is not infighting, there is not bickering, there is light competition for things when it comes to funding, but no one begrudges anyone else. And I hear people advocating for Catholic Community Services funding. I know we advocate for others. We all play well together. And so my fifth recommendation is that teamwork gets supported by our agencies. Okay, so we do a lot of grassroots teamwork. Hire 253 is a great example. And an agency took that on because things get too big at some point and someone needs to own it. And so I really encourage us to take ownership of things that are kind of crowdsourced so they can continue on indefinitely. Our coalition might be a good example of that. Kind of crowdsourced, maybe big enough that it's ready for someone to adopt. Inclement weather is another great example. That just sort of pops around and nobody really has ownership of how we do inclement weather in Pierce County, right? Different people do different bits. but we're ready for an agency to take that on. And that's what really, it shows the value of our teamwork together. We find a need, we meet the need, but sustaining it takes an agency or a government organization to get behind it. That was my good. And there's actually so much more good. I could just go on about the good forever. But then how would I have a picture of Lee Van Cleef, right? Lee Van Cleef, the bad and the good, the bad and the ugly. Actually, they're all kind of bad and the good, the bad and the ugly. But we have things that we don't do well in Pierce County. And let's just think of them as opportunities, even though I labeled them bad. They're just not good yet. How about that? Oops. The bad is that even though we do amazing things and we do best practices, this is, maybe my last chart, this is from 2015 to 2020. I did a crappy job making the numbers big on the bottom. This is what I think homeless counts look like every quarter, basically. So we look through time and we see homelessness is rising in Pierce County, right? Dramatically. So I came on, 4 years ago, 2016, we were looking around 4,400 people experiencing homelessness. We're well over 6,000. And we saw we're housing more people each year, not dramatically more, but we're having this flow in of more and more. And not only is this going up, but every indication is that it's going to keep going up. We are plateauing this last year, but it's only because spring and fall, or rather summer and fall, which usually are what drive our numbers up, right? This is the time when we usually get slammed with people looking for resources. COVID-19's made things a little weird this year. And I suspect that we're going to see an even higher spike in homelessness, right? It'd be nice if that wasn't the case, but most of us are fearing more, right? So this is a bad, and this isn't a bad that's anybody's fault, because guess what? We don't charge anybody to be responsible for this. We still spend our money wisely. We still do best practices. We respect our clients, but we still have the numbers going up. And if you've ever seen my online tool where you can putter around and try to end homelessness in Pierce County, there's a model, right, that you can plug stuff into. I didn't set it up because that would take forever, but I'll go ahead and post a link to it later in the minutes. But this tool lets you adjust dollar amounts to kind of project what homelessness is going to look like in the future. But in the chart in the left, there is a red line going up, and that's at our current levels of funding. That's going to be our increase in homelessness. From our 6,000 we have now to, in 2023, about 7,500 people experiencing homelessness in Pierce County at any given time on any given night. That's a lot of people. And you cannot believe that number or believe it, it's up to you, but it's true. I made my first meme last night. I'm so proud of myself. I do not understand why I argue with people about how many people are experiencing homelessness in Pierce County. I am willing to sit down and go through the 5 different ways that I can count homelessness in Pierce County. We look at that chart earlier, and you can see the point in time count, right, is a ridiculous count to try to base the actual numbers off of, right? It's impossible for that to be terribly accurate. And it's dramatically inaccurate, right, to the tune of like on a factor of 3. All the other ways that we can look at homelessness, estimating episodes, looking at how many people are currently in the priority pool waiting for a resource, looking at the current inflow to homelessness versus the outflow, all of those things indicate that it's very high. And I have these stupid conversations with people where they say things like, well, according to the point in time count, there's 158 people experiencing homelessness. I say, well, in Tacoma. And I say, well, that's actually you misreading the report. Like, it doesn't actually say that. And it's terribly inappropriate to use that as a tool to gauge our need. And if we don't know our need, we are never going to be able to resource to meet that need. So I believe we need to learn to count. It's probably the second most important thing we can do. I create a dashboard every week that I'm not going to create because I'm not going to have access to HMIS anymore. Pierce County, if you're listening to me, I'll make these things for free if you keep giving me access. This is the dashboard that tells how many people became homeless in a week. It says how many people go, like in this particular week, 25 people were able to enter shelter. 32 entered shelter. From shelter, 25 people became permanently housed. Diversion, permanently housed 37. Yay, good week, except in this top, we see 200 people, nearly 199, started a homeless episode. So we only had 32 shelter beds for the 200 people, right? We served 1 of 6 in shelters, right? We need to look at that all the time, even if it doesn't get better today or tomorrow, right? We're in it for the long haul, and we need to make it better. So I think we need to be publishing weekly. So my 7th recommendation, thumbs up, young man with no hair. I couldn't have gone to school like that and not been ridiculed, but I think he pulls it off. Publish data weekly, right? And maybe daily, right? Lots of us look at the statistics published by the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department about how many people are COVID-19 positive, right? We obsess over that data. And it's not good news right now, right? They're publishing it even though it's terrible. Like, we want our little lever to be in the green. It took me a long time to figure out how these actual visualizations work. I just want to be embarrassed and say that right now. Anyway, the dial is way out of the green, and still we're publishing it because it's super important that we know as a community, we're not doing a great job keeping each other safe right now. Let's work on that, right? And long-term, paying attention to all that's really important. We need to pay attention to a whole bunch of different statistics. And those statistics are not all homelessness, but they're products of COVID-19 too. And we need to start working on that. We need to pay attention to how many people become homeless, how many are getting into shelter, how many are exiting to permanent housing. We need to pay attention to how many people become unemployed. We need to pay attention to how many people are requesting rent assistance, right? We need to pay attention to how many people are behind in their utility payments. All of our tools to identify when things are really going bad and when we're making an impact because we're putting good resources in. We need to watch all of that, and we're not. Like, we are not watching all of that in a structured way, and we're not telling the story to the community. Another thing we do poorly, this is going to make me enemies, is we fund transitional housing still. I don't understand it. It's really expensive. And sometimes it feels like the right thing to do, but I don't know. And I'm using so I'm going to do wordplay, right? That's one thing that I get in fights with people over too, is when they don't want to call a sweep. And we oftentimes don't call transitional housing. We call it shelter. So the stability site's a great example of something that is essentially transitional housing. It does not have a 90-day stay limit. It has lots of services on site. Again, it's a very successful model, and it may be the appropriate model for some of our most vulnerable in the community, but it's super expensive. And when we've got thousands of people homeless, I'm not sure that we can provide that level of service, right? We need to do something different. And we've also had incredible fails, right? A good example is Betsy Ross House. They permanently housed, 8 people out of Betsy Ross House in its entire existence. We spent millions of dollars as a community to renovate it. To operate it, we spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they created a program that had too narrow of an entry requirement. It's not housing first, all sorts of problems. It wasn't designed around what the people in front of us actually needed. And that's one of the failures of transitional housing. Design programs for the homeless that you want, not for the homeless in front of you. So instead of doing shelters that are actually transitional housing, we need to be more cost effective. We need to do things like safe parking. This is a picture from a car dealer, and I have no idea where it's from, he lets people that are homeless park on his parking lot every night. He's got huge lights, he's got security cameras, he had all the crap he already needed, and he just kind of set things up and he does it. I mean, how cool is that? Is it long-term sustainable? Maybe not, but it sure made a difference to some people, and certainly more cost-effective than our high-cost shelters. Which again, isn't to say we don't need shelters in our system, but we've got to look at how much they cost each night. Another great option are sanctioned encampments. And again, I don't mean our model we do at the stability site or at Tim Shelter. Those are super high cost, right? Sanctioned encampments are typically operated at $50,000 to $100,000 a year, right? And have a lot of self-governance. And those are things that are hard to get going. I get all of that, but you can't spend $1.3 million a year on the stability site to take care of 80 people, right? When you've got thousands that are not being safe in our community, right? Or you throw a lot more money at it. You have one of the two. So my 8th recommendation, And here I've got Scrooge McDuck, which apparently doesn't do a thumbs up in any image on the internet, but Scrooge McDuck, because that man's a miser, we need to deploy cost-effective shelters. And as I walk away from Catholic Community Services, I can start criticizing our civility site as really super high cost. I love the program. We are serving people in amazing ways. And again, it may be what we need to do, but when I was spending a little time on G Street because my lovely son was working on his Eagle project at New Connections, I was walking around and Teresa, who's on the call right now, she has homeless people in her front yard all the time. That's her community because we have failed as a city to give her a safe sidewalk where she can stroll. It's not that it's incredibly unsafe, but it's not the sidewalk in front of my house, right? Which doesn't have people living on it, right? We have failed many of our community members in ways, right? Not only the people that are homeless that don't have a safe place to be, but also the collateral damage of our community areas that have become unpleasant to be on because we're walking into somebody's living room. This is a chart. Okay, I lied. I got 2 more charts. This is a chart. How are we doing? We doing okay? Is this fun? I'm having fun. This is a chart of how many households, everything else I've done before is clients, this is households, how many households moved into permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is the forever, right? We cover your rent, basically. We provide case management for the rest of your life. And permanent supportive housing is, as one might imagine, incredibly expensive. And this is looking at year by year, how many new entries into permanent supportive housing, how many move-ins. And this number needs to be going up really fast, and it's not, right? We've had some good years. 2015, we had 218. Well, that's probably because Guadalupe Vista opened that year, and I think another project opened that year. So in 1 year, right, a new building with 37 units, right, that gives you a nice bump, right? Otherwise, we're dependent on like new projects, which we haven't had a lot of, people leaving, right, because they're graduating and be able to be self-sufficient, or they fail at permanent supportive housing and are back on the streets again, which isn't a lot. Permanent supportive housing, super effective, but we need to bring more in. So my 9th recommendation is for us to fund permanent supportive housing. And if you don't appreciate the pun of house with this thumbs up for housing, I don't know what to tell you. Permanent supportive housing is expensive. We have got to bring money in and do this. And I hear people say this all the time, permanent supportive housing, let's get more permanent supportive housing. And we actually have lost some units in family permanent supportive housing over the past few years. Like we haven't kept what we got because it's really hard to run. So we got to fund it in ways that make it so that agencies like Catholic Community Services want to continue to do it. Because if you make it so hard and so risky, right, that you might end up unable to sustain it and have a massive liability, it's going to be a challenge. I've seen MDC lose operating money out of competitive grant process, and it's like, no, that's the last thing we need to do to support our providers. We need to make sure they're fully funded. Oh, another chart. This is really my last chart. Rental vacancy rates. Rental vacancy rates are an excellent barometer for how fast housing prices are going up in your community. Housing prices are going up in our community every single year faster than inflation. And it's because we don't have enough units available, because we don't have enough units, period. And we need a rental vacancy rate around 7%. That's what communities that see inflation as the increase every year instead of inflation and demand, creating these much higher increases in rent every year. And this is Pierce Couny. It's actually not Pierce Couny. It's the Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma metropolitan area, because that's the statistic I could find quickly. And honestly, housing's a regional thing, as is all homelessness. And we're seeing about a 4%. We're averaging about 4%. There's a lot of margin of error in that, but it's really, every time it's below 7%, right, rents go up too fast. And so my 10th recommendation is change zoning laws now. And I mean, eliminate the need to have parking spaces. I mean, allow multifamily next to my lovely home. I mean, allow heights to go up, 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 right? Communities like Portland have simply done this, and we've got to do it. And I was going for a pun with changing zoning laws by having a thumbs up in the end zone, and you'll note that I selected Tom Brady with the Patriots as the thumbs up. And the reason I did that is because as much as everybody hates that photograph of Tom Brady with his thumb up in the end zone, everybody hates changing zoning laws even more. Every politician is scared to suggest to somebody in Proctor. I was heckled at a North End Neighborhood Council meeting by the audience and by the North End Neighborhood Council for suggesting that they could eliminate some parking requirements for an apartment building in Proctor. It was not popular. It is not how you're going to get reelected to the city council. So we have an education requirement to get zoning laws changed, right? Both for our council members and for our community as a whole. It will be as unpopular as a Patriot fan. And I'm talking to you, my friend Robbie. That is not cool to like the Patriots. That was the bad. And now, my friends, we're going to head into the ugly. We've got ugly in so many ways. We have a New York Jewish man playing a Hispanic gangster in a movie. I thought we had stopped doing that, but maybe we have. And this is just the 1968s. But Eli Wallach is amazing in this role. But I think he's gorgeous. I don't know what the whole ugly thing is, but maybe it's his soul in the character. Anyway, secrecy. Right? This is the ugly underbelly of a lot of what I see in our government. So most of our funding comes from the federal government through the city and the county. A lot of state money too. Not much general fund, county money, some general fund, city of Tacoma money. But one of the things that I think does us a disservice is when we operate in secrecy, when decisions are made outside of the public eye. And I see this not so much in the county. There's times when you need to have things private, like the county with its COVID-19 money, like holy cow, I cannot believe they've done 3 RFP processes already, right? Like they went out of their way to make a public process, right? We do public RFP processes so that the community can audit what we do, so that they see we don't play favorites. And the city of Tacoma's got some real challenges. They have some real tendencies to secrecy. Stability Site was funded by backroom deals. Not evil, right? I was in some of them, right? Good people doing good things, but it wasn't put out to the community to find the agency that put the best proposal together, right? Sometimes acting quick, that's okay. However, we're 3 years into a state of emergency, and I think it's simply being used as an excuse to allow less public oversight of the activities of homelessness. And that is deplorable. It really is. And there's other areas that I see in the city of Tacoma where this is happening. A good example would be how they've eliminated the civil rights investigators. They've ended the contract. Oh, well, it's going to be part of the discussion and budgeting. No, you ended a contract at the end of June, right? You have made a decision to stop it and are unwilling to have public comment around that particular decision, except in some far off distant way, like after the contract ended, right? That secrecy does not serve us well. So public money, public process. And I don't mean you bring one vendor to the city council to get a vote to approve it or not. I mean you have a public RFP process. And that would actually require you to have a plan for what to do in the community to end homelessness. You would have a plan of, we're going to do this. We have 19 shelters planned across Pierce County, and they're going to be low cost. They're going to be some, right? And then when money comes in, boom, let's put it out to RFP. This is our prioritized list of what we want to work on to build up, and give us a proposal for one of those things that's on our ranked priority list of things, projects we need to implement. Like that list doesn't exist. If you gave $5 million to a funder in the county or the city, right, they wouldn't know what to do with it right now. And that is why backroom deals happen, I think, is because they're just not ready to put an RFP process out, right? They're doing all this other stuff. Anyway, public money, public process, and happy little light bulb, right? In the light of day, thumb up for that. Recommendation number 11. Uh-oh, I don't remember what this one was about. I got to skip forward. Ooh, risk. I would like to talk about risk. So now I'm getting way far away from kind of traditional recommendations and heading into my little bucket list of things I care a lot about. This one is about risk. This is the stability site when it had tents in it. People can have food not prepared in these tents, right? They've got burners, they've got barbecues, they've got food delivered, right? This is a pretty safe place to be. There's fire extinguishers. There's been one fire and no injuries related to that, or not significant, in the 3 years of operation. So this is a pretty low risk environment relative to People's Park. People's Park is pretty high risk. These people do not have access to food in the same way. And so it's a much higher risk. They don't have the safety provided stability site. They don't have right fire extinguishers available. They don't have places to wash their hands. And yet the city decided they were going to reduce the size of the stability site so they could eliminate the tents because the tents were high risk. Well, those tents and the way of living for the 30 people that no longer had a space there, they went to, right, probably, like a way to think about it, right, is a less safe environment, right, where they're in a tent somewhere else. But the risk isn't the city's risk, and the risk isn't Catholic Community Services risk. The risk is the individual experiencing homelessness. So we are unwilling to take some risk, and we put huge amounts of risk onto our people experiencing homelessness because we are so risk averse. And so, and it's real. This is a photograph of an encampment fire, right? Like, it is real and it happens, but it's going to happen less in a site operated by people that have fire extinguishers, right? And no need to cook in their tent. So my recommendation number 12 is let's accept some more risk, right? Kids have skateboards not because their fathers want them to have skateboards. Kids have skateboards because a little risk is okay. And so that's my recommendation 12. Let's accept some more risk so we don't shove it back onto the person experiencing homelessness. I love this picture. This is from maybe 6 or 7 years ago. This was a conservative magazine publishing a political cartoon. That's Barack Obama, and he is among the flames, right? Reference to old Nero playing the fiddle while Rome burned. We all know Nero didn't do that because they didn't have fiddles back then. But anyway, the authors were of this, well, the artist that was putting this editorial piece out was basically saying everything was going to pot, the economy was having all kinds of problems, and Obama wasn't doing anything about it. He was just fiddling around. And I like this because it's like, you thought that was bad. Welcome to 2020, my friend. But this notion, this criticism that somebody isn't taking ownership of it, right, which is basically, you're not taking ownership of the economy, President Obama, right, was what this editorialist was saying. And I'm saying that again. We do not ask anyone to take ownership of, as a community, we don't ask anyone to take ownership of homelessness. And so my 13th recommendation, lucky 13, is that we need to charge someone with ownership of homelessness. I talked about this at the beginning. I cannot stop thinking about this as so necessary. Again, the Human Services Department at the county does a really good job of making sure that the money goes, right? The federal money goes to, agencies that are doing good work, right? That it goes to best practices programs. And the city does the same thing for the most part. A little bit more transitional housing going on, right? $73 a bed night for the Thames emergency shelter, $60 a bed night for the stability site, right? That's how much it costs to have one person overnight in those facilities. Is really expensive, but we need to charge someone. And I've got Gryffindor's prefect badge, right? Basically, they gave someone responsibility, right? And hopefully resources, right? They got the cool prefect bathroom. Anyway, too much Harry Potter. But we don't do that, and I don't know why. Sometimes our main funding agencies talk together, but we do not ask anyone. In the newspaper, I had my major talking point, like if someone has a heart attack and 911 doesn't show up to help out, we will be appalled and we will find out why. Because someone's responsible to make that happen, and we provided them the resources to make that happen. We have done neither with homelessness. And I don't know how we would end up doing that. Is it the COC? Is it a new body? What would have to happen is the county and the city would have to give up some control of how their money is spent. And they would have to be collaborators in a way that perhaps those city council and the county council members are unwilling to allow happen. I don't know. Poverty. I could go on about the poverty that causes homelessness, but this is about the poverty of people working in the homeless field. I started my job 4 years ago making $19.38 an hour. As a 44-year-old man with 2 children and a wife, I was making a salary that I would not be able to afford to live in the house I was living in. And I have a college degree or 2, right? And some work experience. Eventually, my amazingness was noticed, and I got a raise to $26 an hour, right? Which seems nice. It's a lot more than we pay a lot of our case managers who are toiling at the $19, $20, $21, $22 an hour range. But $26 an hour, $52,000 a year, still doesn't rent me a 2-bedroom house for my family of 5 now, because my father-in-law lives with us. This is a picture of Uber. I don't know how many people that work in the homeless field also drive for Uber because they can't make ends meet. They have a second job. They're a single parent, they've got 2 children, and somehow they find additional childcare in order for them to get their bills paid. Maureen's saying 16 or 17 an hour, right? And part of why I'm leaving is greed on my own part. And I probably could have negotiated a higher salary, but that feels a little unethical. I don't think that I can ask for more money when I know that my coworkers are making so little. And so this is my next recommendation, number 14. We need to lift homeless workers out of poverty. And this is going to take everybody. This isn't Catholic Community Services isn't paying enough, or Goodwill isn't paying enough. It's really hard to pay more, right? We have to be competitive for our grants, or they don't get funded. We have a mindset that says that we need to be living in poverty to serve people in poverty. And that's crazy. That's a picture of 2 thumbs up, right? Next to the Louvre, right? Who wants to go to the Louvre? Blah, right? Too crowded. I'd rather go to the museum in Lille. That's freaking amazing. But most of my coworkers are not going to be traveling to France to visit the less populous Beaux Arts Museum in Lille, because they can't freaking afford it, right? They're probably thinking about how they're making rent, not how they're going to enjoy the Dutch Masters Room, basically to themselves, because everybody flocks to Paris in some misguided sense of, anyway. But you get what I'm saying, that those things just, I was trying to get a Disney one too, like there was a Disney Paris, but it was, yeah, it was watermarked. I didn't think the watermark was that cool. Anyway, borrowed a lot of people's pictures off the internet. But you know what I'm getting at here? We need to talk to our funders, and our funders need to take some responsibility, right? There are ways we can get there. Do we need to do unions? I don't know. It's got to be something, though. Maybe it's working with all of our funders. Maybe it's grading our social service providers on how well they compensate their employees and setting that base wage, right? What is our base wage? Probably 3 times the monthly cost of a 2-bedroom house. That doesn't bug me. That might work okay, right? But the poverty that we force our homeless service providers to work in, it actually makes us inefficient. People change jobs all the time because they have to. You get 2 more bucks an hour, you're going to go, right? There's just no way you can justify staying and providing stability for your clients when you can get 2 more bucks an hour, right? Because you're on the edge already and the tires are getting kind of bald. All right, almost to the end, folks. Number 15 is coming up. This is a picture of Donald Trump's cabinet in 2019. 64% of America is white, basically. But you can't tell that from this picture, can you? It's 92% white. And I'm not sure that that cabinet is going to do a great job of understanding the needs of all of the people that they're serving, right? Let alone most of the white people, but certainly not a lot of the other cultural backgrounds that people come with. So my 15th recommendation, my final recommendation, is to continue to diversify all levels of our organizations. And I don't mean just Black people. I mean everybody that we serve. If you are serving veterans, by golly, you would bloody well better have some veterans doing that work. If you're going to serve LGBT community, that just goes without saying. They need to be the LGBT community. If you need to serve poor white people, you need to have some people that understand that experience, just like we need to serve Asian Americans and Native Americans and African Americans, right? We need to have that knowledge within our boardrooms, within our management teams, and within our direct service providers, because that's how we do good, is by fully understanding, right, as much as we can, the experiences of the people we serve. And we don't do a terrible job of this, right? I put this in the ugly, and it probably should have been up earlier. I kind of added it in at the end, and I didn't want to renumber all of the recommendations, so this really belongs in the good. But, you know, sometimes it's just too late. I should do a few more close-ups, right? Good, bad, and the ugly, panoramic vistas, and really tight close-ups of people's faces. That's Director Leon to a T. So to recap, boop, boop, they're all there. I'm not going to read them. And I just really want to say I love all the work all of you do. All of these things are important, and we can individually work on one of these ourselves and progress as a community because we're a team. Nobody needs to do everything, but we can help advocate for these different things. We can chime up when one of them comes up. We can take one of them as our own, right? I have every intention of trying to get some folks that care about increasing income for social service workers and coming up with some strategies to do that. It doesn't need to be all of us, but it needs to be some of us, right? And I'm excited for what this group can continue to do, because even if we don't do any of these things except make time to learn and share, we are going to help people exit homelessness sooner because we're going to know how to serve them better. And with that, a lovely sunset scene. Anybody know what movie that's from? You'll be a sick person if you do. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And that should have been the ride into the sunset. I have no idea what they were thinking with that last skull thing. Really just watch Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Last Crusade and just don't mess with Temple of Doom, right? Nobody needs to see that movie again. So thank you. I apologize for not having my beautiful face on there and having to look at my PowerPoint. I haven't read any of the comments, although I saw some scrolling because I was talking the whole time.